thanks for coming. I'm best known for Retro City Rampage, a game which I developed and released on a whole slew of platforms, and I did it entirely single-handedly with some help with some of the art and the audio. So I did all of the programming, design, business, PR, marketing, everything. And before that, I worked at other game companies as well. So I worked on small to AAA, and I worked on original IPs and licensed IPs, and the whole gamut of things. And I have acquired a good perspective of the whole spectrum. And I put this talk together to give everyone else a heads up as to what's involved, because there's just so much to learn and so much to know when you're dealing with console games, especially when you're doing it with your own company as an indie. I worked as a programmer for all those other companies, and that didn't prepare me for just all of the other stuff that I had to learn when I finally went indie. Is that better? Okay, hopefully. So this is Retro City Rampage. I released it on PS3, PS Vita, Xbox 360, Wii, and PC. And in that were all of these SKUs, because there are different regions and different platforms and different storefronts. And it was a lot of work, so I was working on even more ports, but then I had to take a break because I was just so exhausted after those 5. So the quick rundown here is Retro City Rampage. It launched at $15, and after some Steam sales, it averages $10 per unit. It sold over 170,000 units now in 9 months and continues to sell. So it's got a really good tail, and it adds another 270,000 from PlayStation Plus. It's earned more revenue this year than last year, which is another benefit of the digital market. We don't have to worry about shelf space being thrown into the bargain bin and then disappearing completely. With the digital era, it can keep going and going. And it's been highly profitable because, unlike Tomb Raider, which it often gets compared to, which failed selling 3.4 million units, this was developed entirely by me, and so I'm the sole owner of the company and all of that, and so I get to enjoy all of the rewards of this. The other big key point is that I spent $0 on marketing, and so I achieved all of this without any actual marketing. The game has been on display at over 24 events around the world, from GDC to Comic-Con, PAX, and E3, and there are only 2 booths which I actually paid for, and the rest were just some of the travel expenses on some of those events, and some swag which I made to distribute. Digital distribution, self-publishing, and social media make this possible. And we can self-publish on just about every platform now, and the one in the end was Xbox, but they just announced that they are having some sort of self-publishing initiative, so hopefully that ends that. I believe that console games are actually a lower risk than mobile, for example, because they've got a higher price point, so you don't have to sell as many units, and the console ecosystem is less discount-driven. So, for example, Retro City Rampage has sold twice as many units on Steam as it has on PlayStation, but it's still generated more revenue on PlayStation because most of those copies are sold at full price. There's less saturation because there is a bit of a speed bump to get onto the platform. It alleviates a lot of shovelware, and the average quality of the game is higher. So you're not seeing the iOS or Xbox Live Indie games where you're just assuming the game is bad before giving it the benefit of the doubt. You also have more control over launch promotion because you have an account manager, and you can talk to that account manager directly and say, which weeks are available? Which are ideal weeks to launch my game? Do you have any banner placement available for my game? And sites like Kotaku, IGN, Destructoid, they have weight, and they can drive customers into buying your game. You don't have to worry so much about the chart placement or something and rely entirely on that.
In the church and the movie actually do work
each week. And you also, if you're making a console game, it's probably for core gamers, and that ecosystem is full of core gamers, so you're hitting a huge mark. It's kind of like, my favorite analogy was Adam Boyes mentioned talking about, it's like taking your guitar to the middle of Times Square to try and get discovered. A lot of people will walk by, but they won't necessarily be your customers. And it's similar like that with consoles. If you're making a core gamer game and you release it on a console, you're hitting your market. The hitch here, though, is that there's more to releasing a game than developing the game itself. There's a lot involved in releasing on consoles. So the best way to sum it up here is that I worked on this game for 3 years full time, and a third of that was spent on everything but the game. So you can just see here a lot of these things you probably haven't thought about if you haven't released on a console before. And these slides are going to be available and everything, so you don't have to worry about jotting this all down. One of the biggest mistakes I made was taking things one day at a time, because I had this huge pile of tasks which just kept growing and growing and growing. And more often than not, I would be coming into the office to work on the game, to do programming, fix bugs, and I'd look at my watch, it was 6 p.m., I'd just been doing emails and spreadsheets all day. And all of these unexpected things would really stress me out, because when things go according to plan, like the Joker says, you know, everyone's calm, but when things go off the rails, then everyone stresses out. And I encountered that. And some things are out of your control. For example, let's say a product code that you need takes 3 weeks to get back to you after the request. Well, if you're planning on submitting the certification in a week, and it takes 3 weeks and you haven't made the request yet, then you're not going to be submitting the certification in a week. So it is important to be on top of everything. So preparation is key, and if you do plan for all of this crazy workload, you will end up having more time to work on your game in the end, because you'll be derailed less often. And as I mentioned, there's a detailed version of this presentation available, so if you go to retrocityrampage.com/blog, and this will be up at the end of the talk as well. So the first step is just getting onto consoles, and it's getting licensed. So Nintendo and PlayStation have made it super easy. Steam is still sorting out the best approach to get onto their system. They added Greenlight, but they're still figuring it out. Other options are to submit your game to the PAX 10, Indiecade. The PAX 10 was actually what got me onto Steam, so I was very lucky to have that. So submitting your game to all of these awards competitions are a pretty good thing to do. With Xbox, there are still all of these hurdles, but as I said, they did announce a self-publishing initiative, so hopefully they put themselves on the same playing field as the rest. One thing to keep in mind is that you do want to do a worldwide release, but Nintendo of Europe versus America, for example, and same with Sony, they're separate companies. And so in some cases, you'll have to do some of the same work twice, paperwork, distribution agreements, and so forth. Get that done immediately and get it out of the way, and then you're ready to go. You don't have to worry about your game coming out later in another country, because you'll make a lot less money if it doesn't come out simultaneously. Once you are licensed, you submit your game proposal, and they have their various forms for this, but you're going to be filling in game information about your game, projected release date, target regions, and depending on it, maybe a game design document, maybe a playable build, depending. After that, you want to ramp up on the documentation. You want to get a full understanding of the system and put everything on the top of your mind. And also figure out which product codes, network IDs, and anything else that you might need to request. Figure those out early, and then request them immediately. So yeah, it's important to do that, and if you've done that, then awesome. So you've got that out of the way, and now you're going to be a lot smoother sailing. In the development side, I underestimated things a lot, because I had my game ported really quickly. I had it up and running on all these different platforms in 1 to 2 days. And so when I first did that, I thought that I was pretty close to being able to release the game. And I learned that platform requirements in many cases actually take more work than the actual porting. And even when I started doing the platform features, leaderboards, for example, I had the leaderboards reading, writing, and displaying. I thought I was almost done. And then I found out, oops, there's disconnects, caching, error messages, retries, events, sorting, rank estimation, throttling, you name it. All of these little things that you don't think of add up and bog down your schedule. So these are the foundations of a console game. These are the things that if you're just doing a simple PC game or a Flash game, you probably haven't encountered. And some of them you may need to actually completely rework your UI flow or other things to account for these. So preparing for multi-user support, even if it is a single-player game, and multi-controller support. So any controller could be player one. You've got users and you've got controllers. And the users could be indexes 1, 2, 3, 4. They could be IDs. So you need to be flexible. Asynchronous functionality is one of the biggest things. This means that if you're trying to read a file, for example, You can't just read the file, wait for it to be done, and then continue on. The game needs to keep running. And so you would do a thing where you kick it off, where you just say, start reading from this, and then you keep doing your render loop and all of that. When it's done, you either poll to see if it's done or have a callback, however it's set. And then you can continue on once it's done. Threading is also going to be required in certain cases. In some cases, it's just required to get platform requirements in there. In other cases, you really want to do it for performance. You're throwing away performance if you don't thread. Handling events, like if they press the Xbox guide button or load the PS3 cross-media bar, you may need to mute the music volume or do other things. Online and offline states are pretty important, whether or not you can read and write leaderboards, if you need to reconnect when they're trying to write leaderboards but they had been disconnected. Sign in and sign out are huge on Xbox, especially because they completely dictate your flow. If the user is playing or if they're not signed in, what do? If they sign out, it exits the game, it goes back to the title screen, and they can't go to the main menu until they're signed in, and so forth. All of these things are driven by this, and if you don't account for it up front, then it will cost you a lot of time. Save games, of course, I'll talk in a bit more about, and they vary between platforms. System overlays, so if it's rendering an update dialog from the system, you're going to need to display that and maybe pause your game while that's up. Trial mode will be a lot of work, a lot more than you think it will be, and load screens. When you set up your system, when it boots up, these are some of the things to keep in mind that you're going to have to be doing. You're going to check the system language and set it to be localized to whatever that system's set to. On PlayStation, for example, in Japan versus North America, cross and circle, here it's cancel and accept, there it's accept and cancel. Licenses, checking if it's in trial mode. Checking the video mode or the available video modes. Checking the country and region and age restrictions. So you may need to disable online or display an error message and exit the game if the user is too young. In that case, you do need to display error messages. In fact, you'll need to display them if a save game fails to allocate, for example, on boot. And the ESRB screen and other things like checking the free space, save games, and trophies. The easily underestimated are the players, the save games, and the leaderboards, as I kind of alluded to here. The leaderboards, kind of enough said. You can see this is a big list of stuff. I'm sure most of that stuff, if any of you have done leaderboards or whatnot, didn't really think about at first. One big tip, which I have to mention because a lot of people don't do this, is that you should have some sort of fake data set of fake information like leaderboard scores and usernames that you can display instead of connecting to the net and downloading scores. This will allow you to iterate and build your UI very quickly. If you're waiting for it to download scores every time you want to tweak the UI, it's going to really slow you down. An example of how the save games differ between platforms. On PC, you'll just launch your own save menu. On PlayStation, you'll launch their save menu. On Xbox, you can launch your save menu, but only after their storage selector and you check the free space. And then when you're auto-saving, maybe you want to just save the game, but if a slot hasn't been selected or the memory card was removed and the slot is no longer there, you have to launch the save game manually. And the error checking as well. Sometimes before you call the SDK function, you have to check stuff such as the free space. Other times you can do it just at the end. The screen as well, you've got to deal with various resolutions. 4:3 and 16:9, 50 and 60 hertz, that's European and North American TVs. And safe zones are huge. So the Ouya unfortunately suffered from the case where a lot of games launched and on the edge, like the high score was cut off because TVs cut off up to 10% of the edge of the screen. So make sure that nothing important is on the edge of the screen or you'll fail cert because it just won't be compliant. One of the biggest ones is the terminology because this isn't just on your shoulders, but also every single person translating your game. They need to be fully up to speed on all the terminology. And this includes things like the exact message that needs to be displayed when you're saving your game, if there's an error saving your game. On top of that, it varies between regions, it varies between platforms, and it varies between languages. For example, the Wii Remote in Quebec, in Canada, is called something different than it is in Paris, because of Nintendo America versus Nintendo of Europe. So you need to be fully up to speed on this because you don't want your translator to make a mistake and you fail a search and then your game's delayed because of that little string. Prepare to put your game in English, French, and Spanish for North America, English, French, Spanish, German, Italian for Europe. And hopefully those who translate your game are available, because other things may come up in the future after you finish the game off, such as a store description that needs to be localized. You're going to have to create a lot of assets: icons, banners, screenshots, box art. Prepare that. Have the Photoshop files ready to go if a marketing asset comes up and it needs to be of a specific dimension. Make sure you can do that. E-manuals, various systems, number of platforms times number of pages times number of regions times number of languages. That's a lot of pages and it adds up. System banners, for example, these things are really cool, but they take some time to do, and if you do them wrong, then you'll fail cert, so you have to be careful. And just a few more examples of things that you have to account for, just multiple store descriptions and so forth. So once you're ready to submit, make sure you have your game ratings. It will cost a lot of money if you do them absolutely worldwide, and time. The best bang for your buck is just to do PEGI, which is Europe, and ESRB, which is North America. And remember that, like I said, different regions are different SKUs, so you're going to be submitting different builds, and the terminology and other platform requirements will vary between. If you're doing a worldwide release, especially multi-platform, you want to leave at least 2 months before launch to submit it into certification. You will fail certification the first time, at least, because it's very difficult to get everything right, but you might even just misinterpret one of the platform requirements, because there are hundreds among all the platforms. And you want to get it through certification early enough so you can get review codes, so they can have ample time to review your game and have the review of launch date. And I won't go over it in detail, but this is a list of stuff. So even when your certification build is done, fully tested, it is gold master, this other stuff has to be done before it can be submitted. So yeah, you're probably exhausted just from hearing all of that. And you'll be even more exhausted once you're finished the game. But if you're doing the PR and development, you're going to have crunch time to finish the game and then crunch time at launch, because I had over 1,000 emails in one day to respond to, people requesting review codes or interviews or whatever, and I was just dead because the PC build I finished and compiled like half an hour before it went live, so it was pretty insane doing it all myself. But, you know, I can enjoy the rewards now and recuperate. So post-launch, here are my magic numbers. So you can see here how much revenue has been earned on PSN and Steam. And the interesting thing here is just how many more units I moved on Steam than I moved on PSN, yet the revenue is still higher on PSN. And the revenue is really low on Xbox. There are a lot of factors that result in that, but I'm just glad I'm multi-platform. And PlayStation Plus completely skews things, so I made it a separate chart, but including PS Plus, that's what the sales are. The development and production time per platform was pretty ridiculous when you see how much was on Xbox, because you had to get a publisher and all of these other things. Hopefully the self-publishing initiative brings that number down, because it definitely wasn't worth the time or investment. And this was the production cost, but the WiiWare will now be more along the lines of, or Nintendo ones will be along the lines of PSN now, because they've streamlined things, and Xbox is the only one left who has it yet. So PC digital distribution, Steam is really your breadwinner. If you can get on Steam, that's really all you need. And if you're not on Steam, fight tooth and nail to get on Steam. There are a lot of people that complain and say they don't like Steam or whatever, but they really are a vocal majority, but they're really the minority, because almost everyone buys the game on Steam. And even those who buy it direct and get a free Steam key, redeem their Steam key. So like 99% of people have a Steam version of this game who have it on PC. The problem is with the other portals is often they have contracts which try and give them the upper hand above Steam, but at your expense. And those are some of the reasons why you have to be careful, and if you're on Steam, you might just want to sit back and relax and just enjoy that. So the platform summary here is that Steam was the best return on investment because there were no dev kit costs, it was just no certification, super simple and easy. 3 full man days of work from I have a PC version 2, it's ready to be released on Steam. Direct sales were worth doing because you get a bit more rev share, but the bread and butter is Steam, absolutely. the non-Steam portals are profitable, but they complicate things. And Vita, surprisingly, was the most lucrative console platform. So it just has that magic balance right now of users and competition. XBLA was a long story. and WiiWare I did as a fan service. So it was the end of the life cycle of that platform, and I wanted to release it anyways just to keep my word. But the weaknesses that they've had there, they've actually fixed for 3DS and Wii U. So don't judge anything by the WiiWare. So the moral of the story here is just that there's a lot more to shipping a console game than building the game, and you have to prepare for that because it all adds up. And don't do what I did. Try to work with at least one other person to share the workload. Thank you.
So we have a few minutes for questions. If anyone has questions, go ahead and raise your hand. We'll bring a microphone around.
Hi. If you don't mind me asking, what's the PlayStation Plus sales like? I mean, does each download count as if it was a sale itself, or how does that work?
Oh, we're not allowed to discuss.
Oh, you're not? Okay. All right, thanks.
So, what kind of experience did you have prior to this game? Because I'm making a game right now, I'm hoping to go through this process too, but this is my first time.
Right.
So, like, I know they ask me what kind of experience you have prior and all that.
Right. So I worked at other game studios, so I started as a hobbyist. I was like the indie before the term was coined. And then I got a job in the industry and worked at a few studios and gained experience working on the platforms there. And at the time, that was actually very, very important, and that was what allowed me to get onto consoles. But now they've opened it up, so you don't need the experience. And you see Octodad, for example, just a bunch of students made that game, and they're on PS4 now. So just showing them that you have a game and it has potential, and you have the work ethic to pull it off and finish it. That's kind of the important thing, the biggest thing to emphasize.
I'm curious about, you said you spent zero on marketing, but then you said that you spent money on travel expenses and swag, and I know I did remember seeing an ad for it, a video ad. So did you literally spend nothing, or did you just not track it, or?
Well, there hasn't been any money spent on actual ads. So any ads that you see happen to be just provided for free by maybe the platform or so forth. Technically, yeah, the travel expenses, the airfare, the hotel, or printing some marketing materials would to give away at PAX. Technically, that's marketing spend, but other than that, really, it's zero. I've never paid for an ad or anything like that.
And just as a follow-up, for any of the swag that you did spend money on for conventions and stuff, did you seem to notice any particular that actually helped?
It's hard to say. I was very surprised though, because I did a mock NES box and I did a mock Sega Master System case insert. And the NES box was elaborate. I was really excited about it. The Master System was just a plain white thing with a blue grid on it. It was nothing fancy. Yet I did that 2 PAXs in a row, and it was sold out immediately. Or not sold out, it was just gone immediately. Everyone loved that one, and I couldn't quite understand why. But at PAX, I find that buttons and stickers are the 2 biggest things that people love to eat up.
Yeah, on Steam, how do you drive, how do people find you on Steam?
Banners are night and day. If you have a banner on Steam's front page versus no banner at all, that could multiply your sales by 10,000. It's incredible. You do get more sales. For example, the game had already been in several sales, and so by the time this summer sale rolled around, it was put on sale, and it didn't have any explicit banner placement, but it still, the sales jumped at like 50 times what they were, or something like 5,000% or something when the summer sale started. And I think that was actually more attributed to wish lists, because Steam now has wish lists which notify you when a game goes on sale. The funniest thing that I found out, though, was that it had some indirect front page placement during that sale because it was one of the community choice votes. So they had vote for the game that you want to be on sale, deep discount for 8 hours. And it was Meat Boy, Retro City Rampage, and another game. And even though Retro City Rampage didn't win, of course Meat Boy did, during that time that it was on the front page, its sales jumped. As soon as that ended and people realized it wasn't getting the deep discount, they bought it anyways. And that created a huge spike. That huge spike put it up the charts. Once it was up the charts, it was able to stay on the charts. And so for the remaining time of the summer sale, just by that chart placement, the sales were way up.
So you want to be in the competition and not win.